Hello, I'm Ray Price, professor at the University of Illinois, and my colleagues Bruce Vojak and Abby Griffin and I have been studying people that create new categories of products. We have taken the time to look at these people in various industries across the United States, and we've come up with a model that looks at the innovation process. And as you can see here on this slide, it comprised of 5 areas of finding the right problem, understanding the problem, inventing and validating, executing, and then creating market acceptance. As we look at these things, you can see that in our concept, these all overlap considerably. But we expanded this model and created what we call the hourglass model of innovation. And that is that the innovators come in with this motivation to innovate. And then there's an effort there to find the right problem. Now, finding the right problem is an interesting piece. We talk a lot, and a lot of you have heard and studied a lot about problem solving. But there really is an art to finding the right kind of problem. And we're going to talk about that here in this particular segment. But I want to review this hourglass model because it says they find an interesting problem, they have an interesting problem, they understand the problem, or they go off to understand it. Often as they do that, they come back and refine it. They do that. They may cycle around that. So we see this process as a very iterative process. And then they drop into the invent and validate. Sometimes as they're in that piece of the process, they go back up to find the problem or to define it again or understand it better or to actually find a new problem because they figured out that that wasn't the right problem. They drop down to execute. Again, there's an iteration back and forth with invent and validate. Then there may be a proposed solution that creates market acceptance. They're refining that and doing until they can launch flawlessly is the goal of this new product development effort. As we do that, we want to focus on this little segment on finding the problem. As we look at that, we said they come in with this motivation to innovate. There's a personal orientation. There's a focus. There's this joy that innovators have and category creators have that says they just get joy out of finding and understanding and solving tough problems. So it's that personal orientation that comes in, and then they use multiple approaches to uncover the problems. They're always evaluating that, cycling back and forth in there, so there's another iteration or more within this particular segment, and then they come out with an interesting problem. An interesting problem here has a potential for impact in that it makes sense to a company. Most of the time, the people that we've been studying have been in companies, but if you're in companies or you're an entrepreneur or anything else, the product has to have a potential for long-term success in a way that will make money for a company. It has to be feasible, and it has to be acceptable to management and the customer. So you have something here that's going to be that says that if we could solve this problem, it would make a difference to the organization, make a difference to customers. That's what constitutes an effective problem. As they look at this multiple approaches to uncover problems here. Often they'll work backward from this strategic perspective. They'll start it from a very strategic point of view, and then they'll work backwards to say what the end point is around their vision. For example, one of the innovators, category creators that we studied, wanted to build, was working in the heavy equipment industry, and he wanted to do GPS within those systems. And he was coming up with a whole bunch of ways to do that and introduce it into farming equipment, earth-moving equipment, other things. His vision was to be able to drop the equipment in a deserted place, in a mountainous area or in a forested area, just drop nothing but equipment, no people, be able to come back a year later and land a plane on the airstrip that the equipment built without any people there. Interesting vision, powerful vision that would capture somebody's imagination. As they go in and search for these problem finding, they're curious. They ask broad problems, they look at broad areas, they ask deep questions. There's always a questioning, there's always a curiosity there. And one of the things we found is that they often start from a customer perspective. They don't necessarily start from a technology perspective. So it's not a technology in search of a problem, it's a problem in search of an answer. So they look for these unarticulated customer needs. And then as they do this, they'll often look at the same data that everybody else looks at, but they'll reframe the problem in an interesting way that would be able to allow them to tackle it and be able to solve the problem that other people have not been able to solve. And they reach widely. They use other domains for resources that would help them understand it. The people that did the plotter at Hewlett-Packard looked back into their experiences of developing the little grit wheel that allowed the plotter to move to when they were working in a logging area in the Northwest, and seeing some of the systems there that had grit wheels that helped them move and get traction on ways that would solve interesting problems. So they're looking very broadly, they're curious about a lot of things, and they're looking to be able to come up with an interesting problem that makes a difference both to the company and to the customers.